Manage parts rebuilding, manufacturing. Many shops track and manage their parts rebuilding or parts manufacturing business in MaxxTraxx. We've come up with a workflow suggestion to be able to track the parts or rebuilding components and your internal labor used in the manufacturing process, and obtain an actual cost for that rebuilt part to set your selling price based on that cost. Now, the key to obtaining an accurate financial picture of your rebuilding business is to track all your parts in inventory, including the cores you rebuild, the components or new parts used in the rebuilding process, your shop labor, and the final rebuilt part. We use the Restock Parts feature to pull those cores and rebuilding components out of your inventory once they've been used to rebuild a part, add in some labor, and then have a resulting rebuilt part restocked in inventory ready for you to sell. Let's take a look. Click on the Restock Parts icon on the toolbar. Click on the Input Receive Vendor Invoice button in the lower left, and we select a vendor that represents our internal rebuilding business. I created one called Ascent Rebuilding. Remember, all of these restock invoices will be for $0. Click OK, and these $0 restock invoices won't pose to accounts payable in any way. Now I start off entering a credit for the used core in stock that I'm going to rebuild. Add line item, receive credit for returned used cores. So we are crediting our quantity of used cores here since we have one less used core on hand, and this will also take into account moving the dollar value of that used core into the new rebuilt part core bank. Next, we click the Add Line Item button again and select Receive Credit for Return Part, and these are the various components used in the rebuilding process. The cost is not entered here automatically because we're using the credit feature that would enter the cost paid last time you bought this part from your primary vendor. However, as we're crediting these parts back into our internal inventory, there's nothing for MaxxTraxx to reference since there was no last time we bought it from ourselves. So we need to manually enter the cost. Note here, all these parts we are crediting back because we used them in the rebuilding process should already be on this parts list. Now, we need to be able to track our internal labor costs for manufacturing. We use a sublet labor credit here, tracked on your general ledger as a negative cost of goods sold, which offsets your parts cost of goods sold when that rebuilt part is sold. We'll examine the accounting of all this at the end of the video. We need to create a special rebuild sublet labor that is tracked in a special account on our general ledger. And this is a one-time thing here to create this sublet labor. Let's click the Add Sublet Labor button and create that now. We'll call this Internal Rebuild for the code and the description, and we'll leave the sublet costs blank. The very important part here is the product code that we're going to use to track our internal labor in a very special way. Click Select and the Add Product Code button in the lower left, and we'll name it IR for the code and Internal Rebuild for the description. Now, for our purposes, we're going to give all three of these tracking accounts the same account number, and really, we will only ever use the asset account, as this sublet labor, which we're creating this code for, we would never use on a customer RO just for internal use. So let's click the Select button and click the Add GL Account button to create that special account in the general ledger. We'll make it $58,000 and call it Labor Manufacturing Offset Account. And remember, we'll cover this in a little bit. The type is a cost of goods sold account here at the bottom. And let's click OK to save this new account. And important here, make sure to select it. And this is now our asset account. We'll do the same for the income account and the cost of goods sold account. And remember, once this is set up once, you'll never have to bother with going through this process again. And click OK. And once more, select to apply this product code to the sublet and OK. Now we can select this sublet credit for this restock invoice, and when it asks what to assign the sublet credit to, just select the bottom one, I do not want to assign this sublet, and click OK. So let's look at what we have here. The used core out of inventory, along with the new components used in the rebuilding process, our internal labor tracked as a sublet, and now we enter that new rebuilt part with a new core charge back into our inventory. Select the part from the list, and the quantity is 1. The amount we have into the rebuilt part minus the core charge that is already entered here, and our resulting total is 0. Perfect. This is actually what we have into the rebuilding this starter. Let's post and update inventory, and now that rebuilt part is in our inventory ready to be sold, the used core and components we used are out of our inventory, and all the accounting is done. Now for the fun stuff. When that freshly rebuilt part is sold to someone, the amount we have into that part, or the cost, will be posted to the cost of goods sold parts on our income statement. Let's see how all that looks in our accounting. We'll click the Reports icon, select the General Ledger category, and General Ledger Income Statement. So when a part is sold to a customer in MaxxTraxx, there is an entry made here under Sales Parts. At the very same time, there is another automatic entry here under Cost of Goods Sold Parts. That was our cost for that sale. So let's think about the restock invoice we just did. Remember, we also added a cost for our internal labor, right? Well, that labor cost was wrapped into our parts cost along with the core and the components used when we listed a cost for that part in the restock invoice. I know, a little tricky, but here's the reason. See this manufacturing offset labor account entry here? That is deducting the labor we included in the cost of that rebuilt part. Pretty smart, right? So when we sell that rebuilt part off the shelf, there will be a cost of goods posted. See in MaxxTraxx, let's scroll down a bit. We account for what we pay our guys to do brake jobs and oil changes and rebuild parts down here under wages. So we don't want to expense our rebuilding labor twice, hence the labor manufacturing offset account. There's one hitch in all this though, just want to make you aware. That $35 in the manufacturing labor offset account that we just posted through that Restock Parts a few moments ago, that's taking away $35 from our cost of goods sold. But until we sell that rebuilt part that is now on the shelf, the cost of goods sold, in this case the $65.68, does not show up yet. Remember, the cost of goods sold parts show up at the time of this sale. So over the course of a year, the amounts even out, and you could make an adjustment in your cost of goods sold and manufacturing labor offset account to track for these differences if you wanted to, but you would need to talk to your accountant about how best to handle that. To summarize, we have a process to track used cores, components, and labor in our rebuilding process. We have a way to set cost and track our rebuilt parts inventory to make those freshly rebuilt parts available in stock. And we have a way to track the costs for that internal labor without doing a double entry for the labor cost in our accounting. Please see our training video on managing cores to learn more about how to enter and track purchase used cores, new core charges on rebuilt parts, core charges billed to customers, and used cores sent back to a vendor for credit. And this concludes the lesson on managed parts rebuilding manufacturing.